This is KHOI 89.1 Story City Ames, and you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, where we discuss the ability and disability. I'm Nancy Baker Curtis, a public school teacher, board president for the ARC of Iowa, and a parent advocate. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by my special guest, Zach Meekum, who is the head of the organization Allies in Advocacy. Today, we have a couple amazing guests with us, and so I'm just going to turn it right over to the two of you. Wendy, why don't you go ahead and take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I'm Wendy Andersen. I'm the director of the Common Coalition from Southwest Iowa, and I am a white female with blonde hair and kind of looks like some pink reddish glasses today. I am also a mother of three children, two of which have disabilities.
Wonderful. And our other guest is Kate. Can you help me with your last name?
Weitz.
Weitz, Kate Weitz. Kate, would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Nancy. As I said, I'm Kate Weitz. I am the founder and director of the Common Census Festival, and I sit on the board of the Common Coalition. I am a middle-aged white woman with kind of wild platinum hair and some oversized glasses with a blue shirt on. And I live in Omaha, Nebraska. My son is 14, and he is also impacted by disability.
Well, I just want to thank you so very much for joining us today. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with us, one of the reasons that we invited you all here is that your Common Coalition is doing some amazing work when it comes to informing the general public about the recent law case that's going on, Kennedy v. Becerra, which is centered around the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, otherwise known as Section 504. So for anyone who may not be familiar, can you just kind of set the stage, let us know what is Section 504 and why is this law so significant? And that's really for either one of you.
Yeah, and Kate and I all kind of bounce back and forth off of each other too. So, yes, the Section 504 is really, it's the federal law that is designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities in programs, activities, really any place that receives any federal funding. So if you think about all throughout the community, any place that gets that, and that, because if there is a disability, they can't be excluded from participation. You can't deny benefits. They shouldn't be subjected to discrimination under any program or any place that's receiving federal funding. And so there's a lot there.
It sounds
There's
a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say there is a lot there, but one of the biggest areas obviously is our schools. And so where 504 affects so many of us across the country.
Just to kind of expand on that, because as you guys said, there is a lot there. So the question that sometimes I get in talking about this stuff is like 504, I thought it was the ADA or the IDEA. And I think there's this misunderstanding of like where those laws come from. So can you talk a little bit about how 504 has kind of impacted all of the other disability rights law that we now enjoy?
I can start with 504 really is the building block for all disability rights law. And I think one of the other big things about the 504 that has been lost on a lot of, at least my generation and later, is how hard fought it was to get 504. And so, it was kind of really, I won't go too deep in the history, but 504 was really kind of a conglomerate of amazing disability advocates in the 70s that all centered and found their way to Berkeley, California. Not surprising. It's kind of a very hotbed of area of our country when it comes to cultural change and particularly protests. And so it was this group that was out of Berkeley that really pushed for the 504. It was, a nationwide attempt, but really the people from California are the ones that kind of pushed it. There's, Judy Heumann, who a lot of you may have heard of. She was one of the main pillars of this particular movement. So the 504, which they pushed and pushed and pushed, finally was signed during the Carter administration. But like I said, it's the building block that then led to the ADA in the signed in the early 90s, and then IDEA. But with 504, you have the FAPE. So like within the schools, and Wendy, kind of bring me back here if you need to, but FAPE is free appropriate public education. And so not only did you have these disability advocates that were pushing for the 504, but also within the schools, you had a lot of parents lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit trying to get their kids integrated into public classrooms. And so that's where 504 and FAPE, that's what those two mean. And that is covered under the 504, not the ADA. Wendy?
Yeah, I think you did great.
Thanks.
Yeah. It was great, Kate. Yes.
And I think you're talking about so many things that are really important. We're throwing tons of acronyms around, and so I'm going to bring us back for just a little bit. So the Rehabilitation Act is often referred to, as 504. But when we talk about the ADA, we're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Senator Harkin was the one who sponsored that legislation. That's the one that the Capitol Crawl was centered around, and really that's about access in public domains, right? Access through ramps and other sorts of accommodations in the workplace that prohibit discrimination. But when we talk about IDEA, that's the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, right? And so really 504 can work in tandem with these other laws in order to ensure that the civil liberties of people with disabilities are protected. And I think that's really important when we're talking about, and we're framing this through a lot of the current divisiveness that's occurring right now in our political realm, right? So often, I think people with disabilities feel like their rights are being chipped away. And I think Kennedy v. Becerra is just a great example of why they feel that way. And so if it's okay, I'd like to talk for just a little bit about what is Kennedy v. Becerra.
Isn't it? I hate to be the police here. Isn't it Texas v. Kennedy?
Thank you. I am completely wrong. Becerra was the guy before, and Kennedy replaced him, right?
And so now it's just a different name. But
no, and thank you
versus Kennedy.
Yeah, you're all amazing humans, and we all make mistakes. But this is why we need to have this conversation, right?
Well, and that's exactly it, Nancy. I mean, it's changed, and it keeps updating, and they keep changing all of their directives within the lawsuit. So yeah, and Zach, thank you for the catch, and thank you for setting us down the correct course. But I'm gonna let Wendy go ahead and just touch on where the lawsuit sits.
Yeah, so we just had an update July 29th. With the lawsuits, and everything is just kind of staying. At one point, a while back, a few months back, they were challenging the constitutionality of the 504. And there was the potential for the 504 to be ruled as unconstitutional. And I'm like, just kind of sit with that for a moment. Right? And at that time, as people started to learn about the lawsuit, there were walks to the AG's offices, and more people were calling in and emailing in about this. And so the states had kind of stepped back and said, well, we're not challenging the constitutionality of it. However, it wasn't actually taken out of the lawsuit itself. So there's still the potential for it if there is a ruling on there. It's really what they're focusing on is some of the change under the Biden administration around gender dysmorphia. And so instead of just saying that, right, they're opening up the whole thing. So they're risking, as we like to say, and as Representative Josh Turk says a lot, like we're risking approximately 25% of the population for something that impacts less than 1% of the population.
Yeah.
And so right now the lawsuit is really just sitting as it is, and they're waiting to see what the administration is going to do and how that might change it.
And I do think it's important to note is that, yes, the disability community rose up and said, you can't do this to the 504. This is so very important for us across the board. And then you have these AGs pushing back and being like, but we don't want to impact the disability community. We care about kids in school. We care about kids with disabilities in schools. And it's like, okay, well, if you do, then why don't you drop the lawsuit? As opposed to just letting it sit there and seeing where else you can kind of maneuver and move forward. And so that's where I think the danger in this lawsuit still sits. And I also think just from an optic standpoint, like they obviously are not sincere, at least in my opinion. So,
Right. Um, yeah, what this really is a game, right?
mhm.
Is they're trying to make removing protections for just people with disabilities palatable. Um, and the first attempt did not work, but they're just regrouping,
Mhm.
right? This isn't over. They're just trying to find the next way to be able to get this through under people's noses, which is why it's important that we're having these conversations. Because if we're
Absolutely.
not vigilant, this could happen.
Yeah. So there is actually 17 states that have signed on to this lawsuit. Iowa and Nebraska are two of those 17 states. And so that's where our focus has been here, and we're going nationally with it. I have had a conversation, I had the opportunity to ask Attorney General Brenna Bird about this lawsuit, and the initial response back was, well, I believe in 504s for schools.
So let's go down that path
And
then,
that's where it's
Wendy.
left.
Yeah, I mean, let's go down that path because this is one of the ways, as a public school teacher, as a school board member, I see 504s in action very frequently, right? And
Mhm.
so it's in that public education sphere and domain. So, what protections and accommodations does 504 guarantee? And how will the changing of this impact kids in Nebraska schools and kids in Iowa schools? And this doesn't just apply to public schools, right?
Right. Yeah. So the 504 really looks at the accommodations that an individual needs to be able to access education. And so it's not necessarily in the direct learning or the direct instruction, but it's looking at what accommodations do they need? Do they need an elevator? Do they
Mhm.
need access to their medication? Do they need breaks because the day is overstimulating? Extended time on tests, different technologies. I mean, that's just a few of them, but there's
Right.
a wide variety. I'm like, you guys could probably all come up with some
Well,
also.
and it's just as broad as Kate, what we were talking about earlier. If your child needs an inhaler at school, it impacts your inhaler. If they need an EpiPen because they're allergic to either, a bee or something else in the lunchroom,
Yes. Yeah.
504 plans are all of that. It's not just what I would say something like quote unquote disability. It affects large swaths of kids. And so that is what at stake. I think it's not only the education, but the safety of our children.
Right. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe one of you guys. Is 504 why we have school nurses? Is that
It's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons that we have school nurses. And a 504 is a legal document. So it's the
right?
beginning of the school year. We were just chatting before we started the show. Um, I said it's my first week back, which is why I'm so tired. But as a public school teacher, one of the things that I do at the beginning of every school year is my case managers that have kids in my Spanish class, they distribute documents, contracts that I have to sign. It is a legally binding document that says I have read those children's 504 plans. I am aware of their accommodations, and I am going to provide them with those accommodations in my classroom. And if there's something that that student demonstrates they no longer need, then that problem solving team works together to fine tune the accommodations to ensure the ones that are in that legally binding document are reflective of the needs of the child, right? So they may add accommodations, they may remove accommodations, but I mean, that accommodation could be trips to the nurse, right? It could be, like for my son, a specialized diaper changing area, right? There are so many accommodations that kids need that are medically based. And those nurses are often paid for by Medicaid.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, well, I can think of, my time in school, right? I couldn't write fast, right? And writing for long periods of time was fatiguing. And most of my high school career, we didn't have a one-to-one laptop thing. That came later. And so I was given access to a computer for note taking and to write essays because it was necessary. I also had a key to the elevator, and I was like one of two people that had it. So I also used it to skip class, because teenage me thought it was more exciting to sit in a dark elevator and watch videos on my computer than it was to go to class. Um, but
It seemed like
that's
a
like,
typical teenager response. I'm just saying.
yeah,
My son would do the same.
but
So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you're both parents of children who have these specialized learning needs. Um, how has having access to 504 and accommodations impacted your children?
Yeah, from an education standpoint, so two of my three children have IEPs and have had 504s. My son Dexter is now a junior in high school, which is hard to believe, but he was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder at 6 months old. So we were utilizing early childhood education services. And when he went to school, it was several hours of a meeting. What does he need to be able to be successful? He has an intellectual disability, a developmental disability, autism, and seizures. So we have the seizure action plan, we have the nurses, the medications, but then also how can we help him be successful? And so it's hours upon hours upon hours of sitting down and figuring out these things. My daughter is severely dyslexic, and we discovered that when she was a first grader. So looking at the accommodations, there are specific reading programs for individuals with dyslexia. What are the breaks that she needs because her eyes get so fatigued, or trying to copy from the board onto paper. Like there's a process that your mind has to go through, and that's really hard. And so making sure that she has access to notes for what she's writing is what everybody else is writing and seeing too. I mean, those are just, in about a minute, some of the accommodations that we've gone through for 16 years. Yeah.
And what about
Um,
you, Kate?
well, I think for me, my son also has, he's autistic, he's epileptic, and on myriad of medications, and also has a pretty bad diagnosis of asthma. And so we did early, OPS, so Omaha Public Schools, which, we set up our IEP, but this was very early intervention. So when he was 3, and our, which was, it was, that was really where I was still at as a learning point as a mother, right? And so learning the diagnosis, learning about accommodations, what this all meant. And so I have to say it was extremely helpful to have, someone was the head of our IEP. And then we had occupational therapists, we had a physical therapist that then the schools provided, once a week in our house. I think we ended up having to not allow Freddie to go past first grade within schools because he was in the hospital over once a month with all of his illnesses. And, as much as I would love to keep him in school for the socialization, I also have to keep him alive. And so that was the kind of we've done that. But I think the big thing for me is, just because I have my son in homeschool doesn't mean that his peers don't deserve the accommodations at school. And so that's why I've chosen, one of the reasons I've, chosen to be an advocate is to make sure, Wendy's kids, and I have other friends with kids with disabilities like that need the IEPs, that need the 504. And so that's, it's kind of our story. So.
Well, I think something that's so important that you just mentioned, right, is well, so we all talked about schools, but even without schools, your son benefits from 504 because the hospital your
Mhm.
son goes to would not be required to be accessible if it was not for Section 504.
Yes, absolutely. The hospital, the doctor's offices, all of these places that we utilize. And actually, I was also looking at, truth be told, I was looking at some of the questions that you had sent before, and it was like, how does the 504 affect your daily life? And that I raised my son, he's 14, but my mother has recently moved in with us. She's 80 years old. Now, don't get me wrong, she is, aging very well, but she is stairs do not she can't see the stairs very well, and so walking into a doctor's office, walking into a hospital, utilizing a ramp is essential for her so she doesn't fall and break a hip or whatever, right? So like I'm in this sandwich generation where 504 is affecting me in two different ways. And so that's another reason why I don't want this to go away. I want to fight as much as I can, not only for the civil rights of my son and his peers, but also for my mother. And then for me when I age to that. So I think it's critical. It's critical to have this, again, it's kind of just like it's hard to imagine a world where it'd be taken away, but it's not that hard to imagine after the last 6 months. And so it's scary.
Well, and I think
Go ahead. Excuse me.
hard to imagine is a great phrase to use there because, I think this is part of our problem is Section 504 and the Americans with Disabilities Act have so fundamentally altered the
Hmm.
landscape of our public spaces that people don't even realize that those are only there because they're legally required to be there. Nobody's doing that out of the goodness of their heart. That's just the truth.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's so important, we quickly went from education right into the medical arena, right? And really, when we talk about and we frame this discussion through this case, which I totally blundered the name before, so help me out. What's the name of the case again? Because I'm going to get it
Texas
wrong.
v. Kennedy.
Thank you, Texas v. Kennedy. Um, Really, it is that's the whole thing. It's about undoing this system, right? And it's not just undoing it in public education, but it's undoing this system in all of these realms, right? And the reason that this was even updated was because of the disproportionate impact and access to these sorts of accommodations that people with disabilities had during the COVID era, right? They weren't given access to healthcare. They weren't given access in healthcare facilities. And that's why the previous administration decided, hey, maybe we need to take a look at this current piece of legislation, Section 504, and maybe we need to update it. And they went through a public comment period, and it was an extensive comment period. And so I think it's important for people listening to understand that the objection these attorney generals have is not even to something that's in the legislation. It's something that occurs in the preamble. It's before the actual law itself. And so if it's okay, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that and how that might, you know, everybody can use a ramp.
Yeah. Yes.
Only some people can
Yes.
use stairs, right?
Right.
And how we all use talk to text now, right? My mom, who was hearing impaired, she watched TV and videos with the captions on. These are all things that are possible because there are accommodations that were created for people with disabilities, and they just happen to also benefit people who don't have disabilities, right?
I mean, that's the crux of it. When you assist your most marginalized in a society, it benefits everyone. And so, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about ramps, curb cuts, tell me who hasn't, raising kids, who hasn't used a curb cut, please, and then the variation in texture and color and the sidewalks, that's helpful to everyone. And so, you're absolutely right, Nancy. And I think that's one of the reasons why, Wendy, you can support me on this too, is that there's so much in the disability world, in education world, in the medical world that is troubling right now. And there's a lot of ways that we could, and Nancy, I have to say, I'm a huge fan after seeing many, you're testifying in front of the Iowa legislature. I mean, I get it, right? As one mother to another, I get it. But you can be pulled in so many different directions. And Wendy and I have made like a concerted effort. Okay, it's like we have to stay focused and really focus in on the 504 and get our two states, Iowa and Nebraska, to really understand what will be impacted if this goes away. And then if we can push out nationally, which we'd like to do, particularly within the 17 states, but obviously beyond, that this will affect everyone. This will affect everyone. And it is, and so that's just honing in on the 504 and kind of staying with our message of protecting it, is really the path that we've chosen to take. So.
And I'm so grateful to both of you for engaging in this fight and for keeping this conversation at the forefront. When I used to teach social studies many moons ago, I would always tell my seventh graders, it never mattered more than it does right now. And so you need to be well informed and you need to have good information so you can make good decisions and choices. Because otherwise, with bad information, you're gonna end up post-election and there are going to be massive consequences that you don't even understand the impact of. And those words, they like echo in my soul right now.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, and today we're joined by two amazing guests and my amazing co-hosts. We're joined by Wendy Andersen, who is a nationally recognized blogger and the director of the Common Coalition out of Omaha, Nebraska, and Kate
Weitz. Yes.
Weitz, okay. Who is the founder of the Common Senses Festival and a parent advocate. I also have my special guest host with me, Zach Meekum, who is the organizer of Allies in Advocacy. So let's keep talking. Kate, you're a parent advocate. You started the Common Senses Festival. What is this and how is all of this kind of tied in together?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I have a background in the arts. My father is an opera singer. My grandmother's concert pianist. My brother's, composer. So that's I gravitated toward really organizing and being behind the scenes in the arts. And so that's what I worked in I like to say prior to my son's diagnosis. And so my husband also ran Opera Omaha for 12 years. Like it's our family. And Common Senses was kind of born out of, we had taken Freddie, who was our son, to New York City for a festival there called Big Umbrella. And that was specifically for individuals, neurodivergent individuals. And we had a great time and, I can go on and on. But the crux of this is that I was mad that I had to go to New York to see all of this and to have my son exposed to what I was exposed to growing up and what I feel every kid should be exposed to, regardless of disability or not. And so that's kind of where Common Senses was born. But we are a festival now. We had our first festival in 2022. This was in 2025. We just wrapped up our second. It was, we had 35 days of programming. We have film, we have technology kind of based within. This time it was all about voice. So we had a AAC, augmented, communicated device exhibit at the Luminarium downtown Omaha. So we had all of these historical devices that people could come and learn and really understand what AAC is and why individuals need to use it to to speak and to communicate. And next year is all about movement. And I'm super excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I think, where this leads into the work and what we had done initially, and hopefully this will segue into what you're going to ask, Wendy, is uh, part of the program of Common Senses was the Common Coalition. And so we wanted just to bring together disability organizations across the metro area to hear about, what's going on? What do you need? What are you looking for? And a lot of what they bring up to us is just, things to do. And so that's kind of where the niche that Common Sense is. We want to supply a lot of really great, not only art, but community gathering for individuals with disabilities, but also a platform for disabled artists. So I'd like to bring in people from all over the world that are doing amazing work. And, you're represented on stage. That makes a huge difference, right? And so anyway, our mission is to explore and celebrate the uniqueness and commonalities of all of humanity under the arts and science and disability acceptance. And so disability acceptance is, that's kind of a wide um, uh, term, and you can probably put disability justice in that as well. And so Common Coalition was part of that disability acceptance within our mission. And then the election happened, and disability justice and disability acceptance really took on a different urgency. And Wendy had already brought in Wendy. We are friends. Our sons are best friends. It's very sweet. And she was running the Common Coalition under Common Senses, and we just kind of decided, you know what, I think this is going to take on a whole new level of urgency. And so decided to create a 501c4, and so Common Senses, and then our sister organization is Common Coalition. And that's kind of how Common Coalition was born. I can let Wendy tell you more about that, but.
Go, Wendy, go.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. It was like Kate said, we just saw in the last 6 months such a greater need to be able to have voices. And we were working with uniting the organizations in Omaha. Like, we're all out here fighting for the same things and doing the same things. So let's work together and do it in a greater way. And so, the mission has grown really fast, and it's exciting. And so really our mission is to unite the disability focused organizations, self-advocates, and the allies across the Midwest to really collaborate. Let's amplify our voices, create collective solutions to advance the accessibility, equity, and disability rights in our communities. And so it starts with Nebraska and Iowa, and we're expanding because we really envision an inclusive Midwest. And as we've been talking about this whole time, we're like, when it boils down to it, what's going to create accessibility for all of us is the 504, and we have to protect it. And so that is when we started the Protect 504 campaign and launched it with an activation call last month. And we are working with an amazing social marketing firm, Cause Lab, and we're creating this campaign. And our whole goal is, first goal is to get Nebraska and Iowa to drop out of the lawsuit, and our second goal is to get the lawsuit dropped altogether.
I love those goals.
So,
we're going for it.
as somebody who's heavily involved in local disability advocacy and is a part of an advocacy organization myself, my question is, for anybody else out there who may be in my boat, how do we work together? How can we help?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been meeting with other organizations, and that's part of it. Like, we're out here meeting with other coalitions, meeting with organizations, saying, hey, this is what we're doing. Can we join forces? Whether your organization is helping to promote the Protect 504 stuff, or you as individuals, how do we get this information in front of more people? And we know that in order to do that, we need other organizations to help. We need other advocates and self-advocates and you know, everybody to understand this, teachers to really understand what it is. So we have the startings of a website, common-coalition.org. We're just working on finalizing that. But yeah, I would say if, Zach, I would love to meet with the allies and advocacy and just share with this because we need to have a louder voice. We need to be heard more.
And we do have materials already. We have some stuff that I know Wendy would be happy to share with anyone. But it's essentially a marketing toolkit. And so it explains the 504. It's a white paper. Another amazing woman that sits on the board of Common Coalition, Lauren Mysek Vargas. She is the CEO of Education Rights Council here in Omaha, an amazing organization that essentially is working right now, I believe, between 300 and 400 students across Nebraska to make sure that they're getting their free and appropriate public education. And Lauren is she's the legalese behind the team. And so she really, I mean, it's amazing what she's done. And we have a recording of her really explaining the in-depths and the dangers of losing the 504 much better than Wendy and I. I think we're doing fine. I'm just saying, Lauren is really, it's great. So, but we have a lot of information, Zach, that we can share, and and then we're also going to start pushing out more social media posts. We have a lot of plans to also just kind of do things that are, in my opinion, fun. I know in Des Moines, the Harkin Institute had sponsored, a viewing of Crip Camp. We plan on doing that here at Film Streams in November. We're encouraging book clubs to read Judy Heuman's memoir, right? It goes really deep into the founding of the 504. And then there's other things like that what that we're working on. And it's just a lot of it is just education and get on people to understand what we've been talking about this whole time is how broad the 504 is and what would happen if it went away.
That's all really great. But say somebody's listening right now to this stream and they want to get involved. Where can we direct them? Is there social media up already? Or
Yes.
an email list?
Yes. We have social media, the Common Coalition, Facebook, Common Coalition Midwest, Instagram, Blue Sky, like all of the things. We have those pages there. If you go to our website, which is common-coalition.org, we have a sign up for our email list. And with that, we'll be sending out the YouTube link and the marketing kit and all of that. So we can definitely get anybody involved. As part of our marketing kit, we have a list of all of the emails and phone numbers for all of the attorney generals across the United States. A sample press release. So we have sent out the press release to all the attorney generals, all the legislators in Nebraska and Iowa. And so that is all in our marketing kit that we are happy to share with anybody who wants to get involved. And there will be more opportunities as we continue with this.
But I will say, Zach, to your point, anyone that's listening to this or watching this right now, if you're so moved and you live in Iowa or Nebraska, if you live in Iowa, call Attorney Bird's office immediately and tell her to drop the lawsuit. If you live in Nebraska, call Attorney General Hilger's office and tell him to drop the lawsuit. So that would be the first thing you could do was call your AGs.
And just to echo that, I would say it's also really important that we talk to our elected officials, right? Contact our governors, contact your local legislators, right? Your representatives and your senators, because those people, they work for you. And you need to tell them how this is impacting your life. Because all too often, when you head down to the Capitol, the chime heard is, well, I haven't heard from anyone. People aren't reaching out. You're not speaking with a unified voice. You're all chirping different messages, right? But this is the one message that we can all consistently echo the same message, right? That we want our children to have their constitutional rights protected through Section 504, and that we want our attorney generals to drop the case.
Mhm. Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and honestly, many of them don't know about it. This has really flown under the radar. And so I've talked to many of, my elected officials and down at the Capitol, and they don't know about it. So the more we can get people talking about it, bringing attention to it, that will get on their radar also. And then our elected officials will start making inquiries.
Right. Uh, and I hate to be the resident cynic, but like the fact that people don't know about it, by the way, is by design, which is why education is so unbelievably important. We saw that when they backed down, when it was Texas v. Becerra, right, they backed down, sort of, and then they tried to pass Department of Energy regulations that rolled back accessibility. And that got public outcry. So they backed down. But they're trying to get these things through quietly. And so right now, it's so important that we maintain vigilance.
Yes. And I had read somewhere where the Department of Energy, they had 20,000 submissions of comments on that one. And that's why they paused that. And I'm like, that's the collective voice that we need on this everywhere.
Which
Yes.
that does sound like a lot, but for something like the 504, the next one, we need more than 20,000 people.
We need way more than 20,000.
We need millions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We probably had that the first time around, 20,000. But this is so big and far reaching that we need a movement.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, and I would even go so far as to argue that there are people who are elected officials who don't understand what an accommodation is. They don't live a life where they have kids who have IEPs, or if they do, they are able to access private supports and therapies or healthcare. And so I just think even, we like to think our teachers are educated, but even teachers may not understand, or school board members, how they can leverage their position and their role to be a voice for people who need these accommodations in their classroom. I can't imagine not providing a text to speech option for a student when it's not a writing assessment, right? I can't imagine not providing an audio version of a book when I'm not testing that reading thing, or I don't need that thing for that point of data, right? Like, let's find a way to make this work so we can show what kids know and their abilities. We're not trying to prove that they're disabled, right? We already know that. We already know that they have a specialized need. And so I just think I would encourage folks to even talk to the people at the local level, right? Because people on school boards, they can leverage their position. People in classrooms, they can leverage their positions, and they should, because it's as you've all said, our collective voices are so much stronger and louder than us individually standing there screaming into the wind.
Yeah. Well, and I 100% agree. And it's been alluded to, right? The 504, the sit-ins in San Francisco at the federal building. Um, like all of those big movements were domino effects that fell from grassroots. Like they started with the first independent living council in Berkeley, California, which was started by the Rolling Quads, which were like the first students in Berkeley, California. And these dominoes fell because at each level, people advocated and were able to build off of the people who advocated before them. And so at every level, it's vital that we do this because then it enables more people to be able to gather and advocate as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go down that pathway, Zach, because I think you really touched upon something important. It's about having uncomfortable conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's about staring straight in the face of the person who doesn't understand and explaining in very graphic detail how this will impact your life, right? If Charlie doesn't have his 504, he'd be laid on a dirty bathroom floor, right? That's where they would change his diaper.
Yeah.
How is that dignified? How is that safe? Right? An accommodation for a table is what allows him to be changed up off the floor in privacy and dignity. Every person deserves that, right? And so I just think that it's about having those very poignant conversations with those real life examples. The AAC device, another example of what my Charlie needs to be successful in the classroom. It's his voice, it's his words, right? And just how we are really robbing people of the thing that we all deserve: access. Access to education, access to healthcare, access to communities. And any one of us could have that thing happen where we need these accommodations, right? It was a stroke that took my mom from being an able bodied, able to walk by herself individual to a full time wheelchair user and learning to walk for the fourth time. You know, it was just that fast. And I just don't think people are willing to sit in that uncomfortableness and feel that moment and know that this isn't really about Democrat or Republican, red or blue. We're not trying to convince people to be anything. We're saying every single human deserves to have access. And I think the idea that some get to have it and others don't is that uncomfortable conversation that we really need to be having.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Yeah.
soapbox Nancy, but it
No,
just burns me up inside.
I love it. And we talk about this all the time, particularly for all of us here speaking, that disability can affect you at any time, anytime. Your mother, my mother are two examples. But car wreck or you fall and hit your head. It can be anything. And to take away these rights that you will one day need, like you will need them. Anyone listening to this will need this, will need the 504 at some time in their life if they're not already utilizing it. It's not partisan. And then to send it off and to make it something that is partisan is just outrageous. So.
Well, and you said if they're not already using it, so I just want to hit this point home again. If you've ever pushed a stroller on a sidewalk, you've used it, right? Like an elevator in a building, you've used it. These things are only available because they're required.
Right. And Zach, you hit something so spot on. And I think we've talked about this because disability doesn't just impact the person with the disability, right? It impacts their families, right? I think about how Charlie's need impacts his sister, right? And so it's about being able to do things as a family. And I think about the states of Iowa and Nebraska and our values. And I think family is one of the values we all covet and hold dear in our communities and in our states. And so I just, I don't even have the words, people.
Well, and you really, like you alluded to this earlier, but so many of these things, I think, elevators, cutouts and sidewalks, so many people just take that for granted. Like, of course they're there, right? But without thinking about how hard fought so many of these things were to actually get. And then educating ourselves, educating each other on there's a reason for why they're there, right? There's a reason for the audiobooks in schools. Some kids learn better when they hear it versus when they read it, because of different things. And just everything we've talked about, I think it's just kind of always been part of our lives for so many of us. And so to go back to why it's a part of our life.
Well, there's that, I think, and it's not in my bio, but I'm currently going through the certification to be an ADA coordinator, which it's so fascinating to go to an ADA conference for your coursework, because the amount of sectors that you end up interacting with at the ADA conference that be people that have been learning on to be ADA coordinators. So like any business, any government, organization that has over 50 employees has to employ an ADA coordinator, just for people that are listening to understand this. But at these conferences, you have a lot of people that you would completely understand. It was like there are individuals with disabilities, but there's interior designers, there's contractors, there's
Yeah.
prison employees, there's, hospital employees, superintendents, like across the board. And so that to me is indicative of the 504 and how it is pervasive in our culture in America. And so if that goes away, I just think about all of these institutions not being accessible. Yeah, I mean, again, we're kind of just like going over and over again, but this is just another way to think of it, and all the different organizations that rely on or all of us that rely on the 504 and the ADA for sure. But it's fascinating. It's throughout our life, and it's touched you, and it's touched everybody here in many, many different ways. So
Yeah, and we mentioned it, but I just want to hammer it home one more time. Not only are the ADA and Section 504 similar, they use the same language. So if 504 goes, the ADA very likely will be next.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's the foundation, and if that crumbles, then the whole house goes. Yeah, agree.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have really hammered on this idea for folks to take action. Um, and obviously, we're all super concerned. But let's flip it a little bit. And I think we got to end on a positive note because I need hope, right? And when I'm grinding, like I'm grinding these days right now, and I have drip, I'm data rich, but I'm information poor. And there are so many fires, and I don't know which fire to put out first, right? Where's our hope in all of this, right?
Yeah. The hope that I see, Nancy, is that more and more people are willing to have those conversations. People are speaking out more than they ever have. Families are having conversations, friends are having conversations. And so to me, that's really where I see the hope is that the message is getting out there on the impact of the disability community being torn down right now. And they see that this isn't right. And so more individuals are willing to step up and have the conversations, send in the letters, write emails, do the phone calls, and maybe they never have before. And they're willing to do it now. And so I think just on a greater way, that's going to continue to increase.
I think my hope, and this is one of the things that I do with the festival, but then also particularly with this campaign and the work that Wendy and I are working on together, is to build community. And make sure that, because particularly in disability, it can be very isolating, right? I think all of us have experienced that at some point. And you feel like you're in this alone, and you feel like no one understands. But there are so many people that understand and that are going through a similar journey. And so if you build community and you get people together for whatever reason, for like Wendy said, to send out postcards, to go to a film screening, to talk about a book club, whether it's Zoom or in person, that to me is hopeful, because you know that you have people that are fighting alongside you.
I'm hanging on to hope. I really am. And I think I'm trying to sow seeds of hope, right? Because I think that it is about building those communities and creating those conversations, right? When you have your neighbor sitting next to you talking about how it impacts their life, it's hard not to want to take action, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's framed through that different lens, and I think that lens is so important. If you had a message you could give policymakers, what would you tell them?
Oh, I mean, where do I start?
Oh, be concise, Kate.
Okay, I'm like, and be nice.
Yep, can't say those on the radio.
I know, I'm sorry. I think that I would probably make it more personal and that my son's life matters and he has agency and he brings joy to the world and he brings joy to me and you should fight on his behalf.
Mhm.
Love that. What about you, Wendy?
I was like, I echo that. Just the joy and the love, but it's, like not to go back to our campaign, but like protect 504. And this is why. Yeah. Because of my amazing kids and everybody else out there. So, yeah.
Zach, do you have any final questions for them?
Um, Not really. I just want to thank you guys for your work. I mean, you're doing great stuff, and I really appreciate you building community around this issue. Um, and I hope that it grows, and I hope that we win this, and that community can then be used to gain more ground for disability rights.
Yeah, I
We're
would
working
echo that.
on.
We all need each other, right? And we're all stronger together. Many hands make light work. And so thank you for starting the heavy lifting, right? And I would encourage everyone out there to find you all. So give us those websites and social media again so everybody can follow you or they can sign up for your blast out because I get your information and I really appreciate it. It's that reminder in my inbox that says, do something, Nancy, take action. So
Mhm.
tell us again.
Yeah, it's common-coalition.org. And then, yeah, Common Coalition on any of the socials that you can think of. We're on all of them and we're getting the message out there to everyone. So thank you. Thank you for Nancy and Zach for doing this show and the work that you do with it too.
I echo that as well. Thank you so much for having us and helping us to propel our message.
Well, it never mattered more than it does right now. And so I just want to thank you all for being here today and say that this is KHOI, Story City Ames, and you've been listening to I Am Able Iowa. I Am Able Iowa airs on the first and the last Saturday morning of each month at 9 a.m. on KHOI 89.1 FM. You can also hear us streaming live online at khoifm.org. We invite you to share comments, questions, and program ideas with us at doug@thearcofiowa.org. And if you visit www.thearcofiowa.org, you'll find previous episodes and more information about our program. I Am Able Iowa is produced by the Arc of Iowa, headquartered in West Des Moines, Iowa, with local chapters here in Ames and across the state of Iowa. Thank you for listening, and until next time, this is Nancy Baker Curtis and Zach Meekum saying you are able, Iowa.